You have to be clear, you have to be direct, you have to be timely, and you have to be matter of fact. Have you ever had a hard time saying no? Have you ever felt slighted, disrespected, or taken advantage of? Have you ever had trouble addressing these issues? Then this is for you. Now, the very first thing we need to do when it comes to standing up for yourself is to get our mindset right. So, to start, standing up for yourself isn't an argument. This isn't about going back and forth with a person. This is about you drawing a line in the sand, saying, hey, going forward, this is how I need to be treated. I am not accepting anything less. And it's important to be able to do that effectively. Think of it like you're hiring the best possible person to advocate for yourself. And that person is you. And these methods can apply under any circumstances, from relationships to professional work or even personal acquaintances. So now that we have our mindset ready, let's look at what not to do when standing up for yourself. Number one, don't be emotionally unchecked. More often than not, situations that require you to stand up for yourself invoke strong feelings in you. And a lot of those times, anger is the quickest and easiest response. Take Greg, for example. Greg's a hard worker and a good employee, a real team player. In fact, Greg works so well, his supervisor decides to pile on additional tasks to his already stacked workload because, you know, you're so reliable, Greg. Eventually, this started taking a toll on Greg, but he kept his mouth shut out of fears of being labeled as uncooperative. After all, Greg doesn't want to jeopardize his job security. So, Greg's productivity takes a bit of a dip. He ends up behind schedule. Then one day, Greg gets told by his supervisor, hey, the deadline for that project moved up. I'm gonna need you to work through the weekend. Sorry. To which Greg replies, but I had important plans for this weekend. I even shared that with you. The supervisor then says, I'm sorry, Greg. My hands are tied. This gets to be too much for Greg. He reaches a breaking point and decides to give everyone a piece of his mind. Now, would these emotional responses be unjustified? Of course not. But it's usually counterproductive because it shifts the focus away from the issue at hand. So, where addressing the way you were wronged was on the agenda at first, the priority then shifts into the emotional outburst that happened at the office. Now, Greg, who was so agreeable and helpful, all of a sudden flipped out for no reason. And his reward? A meeting with HR, a new label, and no permanent resolution to the problem. The second thing you don't want to do when standing up for yourself is to go at it halfway. This is all or nothing. No half measures. You can't decide you're stepping up for yourself. Then when the time comes to step up to the plate, you're like, well, um, you know, I guess I didn't like what you said earlier. Or when Katie comes to ask Greg to borrow $500 after not speaking to him for an entire week, he says something like, well, I'm kind of broke, but I guess since you asked, I could try to scrape something together. Listen, this is especially important when dealing with people of a more predatory nature. And that's not everyone. Some people are just opportunists. Most people don't even realize they're crossing boundaries unless you make them aware of it. But there are some people that specifically look for people they can exploit and take advantage of. And when they see you trying to assert yourself but can't follow through, that gives them the confirmation they need that they can take further advantage of you. Or that you're more susceptible to harsher manipulation tactics, like gaslighting or guilt tripping. If you're gonna half ass it, you're better off not taking any action at all. So avoid these two behaviors at all costs. The last thing you want to be seen as is crazy, unreasonable, emotionally unstable, a quack, taking yourself too seriously, sending the wrong message, or a pushover. Or any of these terms used as light seasonings sprinkled on you to put you in a box safely where you can't disturb anyone ever again. So, now that we know what behaviors to avoid, here's how you stand up for yourself. So, as we covered at the top, you want to be clear, you want to be direct, you want to be timely, and you want to be matter of fact. When it comes to being clear, you're trying to bring down the walls of misunderstanding. So you want to state the problem clearly and try your best not to be vague. You want to leave no room for error or misunderstanding. Let people know they're allowed to ask questions or seek clarification if needed. When it comes to being direct, since the best person to advocate for yourself is you, the best person to deliver the message is also you. Don't ask someone to speak on your behalf or fill in for you. You've already decided to go all in, so approach them directly. If you're speaking to them in person, body language is also important. You want to maintain direct eye contact and proper posture. Now, directness doesn't have to mean speaking to them in person physically. Sometimes people better communicate in writing, and that's understandable as long as you communicate that when you are delivering the message. Something like, hey, I'm writing this to address an issue that happened earlier today. I chose to write a letter because I'm able to better communicate my thoughts this way, and I don't want there to be any misunderstandings between us. Being direct also includes stating your boundaries in your communication. This is where you let them know what is required going forward. Or if it's a situation where a simple no would suffice, be sure to communicate that no directly. Not something like, no, I don't know, or no, I don't think so, or maybe. Now, for being timely, you need to use your discretion when it comes to this because you're considering the best time to address the issue for the strongest impact. Okay, let's say someone made an underhanded comment towards you that you want to speak to them about. It may not be the wisest idea to confront them a year later about an off the cuff comment they wouldn't even remember. Or let's say Greg wants to confront his supervisor. It's probably not the best idea to make the attempt when he's rushing to the restroom. Giving consideration to timing is also one of the best practices because it gives you space to get all the other points in check. Sure, there are things that should be addressed sooner than later, but you simply can't go wrong taking the time to yourself to strategize and gather your thoughts a bit. And this is especially true if you're new at standing up for yourself. Now, the last point is to be matter of fact. And I consider it to be the backbone of all the methods because this is what supports it all and gives it strength. This is where you're saying what you're expressing is non negotiable. And you're saying that in your tone and your expression. Think of it as merely reporting factual information. You're just the messenger here. You're stating factually that I'm not doing this. I'm not taking this anymore. I'm not allowing this treatment to happen. I'm not taking part in this any further. This is also why it's so important to have your emotions in check because factual information doesn't have to be emotional. It just is. This is unfair. I don't like the way you treat me. No, I won't be doing that. No matter the circumstances, be it relationships, personal or professional, being matter of fact always has to be a part of it. And maybe you would notice in the examples just now, I've been saying me and I, and I'm speaking in the first person. And that's because you're making a statement over what you hold power over, and that's yourself. You can state your requirements, but it's up to them to comply. And if they don't, you still hold the power to remove yourself from the situation and be a non participant. Remember, this is not an argument. You know, coming to think of it, the best example of being matter of fact is Gus from Breaking Bad. I mean, look at his face, his blank, calculated, emotionless stare. There's literally zero room to misunderstand anything he said. Okay, let's practice this together. Let's do the Gus face right now. Let's try. Gus face in 3, 2, 1. In fact, after this video, just go watch clips of Giancarlo Esposito in any role post Breaking Bad. You'll get it. I understand that the people that may be interested in this video may not be the best at standing up for yourself. But guess what? Practice makes perfect. That's how I learned. So don't be afraid to have this conversation with yourself. Role play it. Practice it in the mirror. I mean, we practice twerking and dance moves in the mirror all the time, right? Should be simple. 9 out of 10 times, if you find yourself in a situation where you need to stand up for yourself, you're probably going to have to see these people again. It's not going to be a situation where you set your boundaries, drop your mic, and peace out into the sunset. Roll credits. This isn't the movies. This is the real world. And there's an aftermath to consider. So, the very first thing you need to consider when thinking about that aftermath is to be solution focused. You're trying to move forward from a problem, not dwell in it, not live in it. So, wherever possible, always try to provide solutions to the problem. Most times, when a person crosses a boundary, they aren't even aware of it. Maybe they aren't the best at social cues. Perhaps they misread a situation. What's important though is that upon addressing the situation, you leave room for the understanding that there probably wasn't any malice intended. Frankly, when people mess up and you make them aware of it, they're willing to act right and move on. Be progressive, as in outwardly show a willingness to move forward with a fresh start. Keep it light. Yes, when you're setting your boundaries, you need to be stern and matter of fact, but you're not trying to invoke fear here. The reality is, as with all conflict, addressing issues like this can sometimes leave things in an awkward place. So it would be beneficial to blow past any residual awkwardness or ickiness by not holding on to any grudges and continuing on without issues, especially if we establish that the transgression wasn't intentional. And yes, that's an added responsibility on your part, but hey, these are bonus tips. It's just for the sake of making things light and easier, continuing on without making the air too thick and heavy, you know? All right, let's look at a few other nuances when it comes to standing up for yourself. Like, why should I even stand up for myself? When should I stand up for myself? You should stand up for yourself because you have worth. Look at me. You have worth. And frankly, if you don't do it, nobody else will. As for when, that's a bit more difficult. And you really have to use your wits about you for it. So I'll say this: everything doesn't deserve a reaction. And knowing when to pick your battles is wisdom. So it could be good to let things slide once or twice until you have a better understanding of what's taking place. Observe a person's behavior, get a sense for what they're doing. Not everything is intentional, not everything is a person trying to step on your toes. Feel it out a bit. And if it's a boundary you can't permit, or you know someone is testing you and you feel the need to draw the line, then you can think about how best to act. I won't mention asking someone else their opinion, even though that could be beneficial if they're responsible. Because I wanted the focus of this video to be about you solving your problems and getting a hold of your life. So I think that's it. I hope this was helpful. If it was, then awesome. If you've made it this far, I have officially run out of things to talk about. And we've already done the Gus space. So here's a quote. Bye.